Good morning all. This is, great. Welcome. And sorry to disappoint you that Andrew Deverell-Smith isn't there, so I'm the very unsuper sub. Andrew rang me out last week and asked me if I could step in on his behalf. I feel very honoured to do so, not least of all because this is the 10th of what has patently become a phenomenally successful event, and congratulations to Andrew and his team for making it so. A highlight, I know, for lots of people, and they always make room for it in their diaries. So great to see you all. As ever, it's all run with great precision here, so we go down to the minute timing. Big welcome, not just for those in this room, but also for those in what's politely called the networking room, which is Deverell-Smith speak for cheap seats. Welcome all in that room. We'll see you later for more networking. Here's a quick run through of what we're going to be up to today. We'll start with a 10-minute presentation from the phenomenal Rob Elder from the Bank of England. We're so privileged, we all are, to hear from him. I don't think anyone else gets to hear his views out there in the real estate world, so it's a really unique opportunity. Rob's going to speak for 10, 15 minutes or so. Then we're going to invite a phenomenal panel up onto the stage, and we're going to, they've got a few teed up questions already, but plenty of opportunity towards the end of things to hear from you, your questions. So please be on the lookout when we get to that stage. We've got Amy and Laura in this room will be prowling with their mics, and then we've got Ryan in the networking room. So when we get to that stage, please put your hand up and don't ask a question until I know you've got a microphone in your hand, but please do think they can be as nasty a question as you like. So, a bit of housekeeping, if you haven't already done so, please turn off your phone now. It might spook the IT and break the fantastic atmosphere that we're going to have. And we're hoping to send everyone away very happy, which I know is challenging in the current climate. Anyway, over and out, and Rob, please, thank you. Thank you, Rob. Beautifully delivered. And I think most of us can understand that, which is great. It's often not the case when one gets analysts and economists chatting to us or perhaps speaking at us. Anyway, we've got a really fabulous panel. And if I could ask them to quickly introduce themselves, kicking off with Daniel. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Daniel Daggers. I am the CEO and founder of DDRE.Global and a business called ADVSR.ai, and I've been an agent for 27 years.
Hi, I'm Geeta Nanda. I used to be a Housing Association Chief Executive of Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing. Now I do a number of non-exec director roles and some advisory work, Barratt's Redrow Board, PRS REIT, PLC Crisis, so everything from the homelessness to the market.
Bob Weston, Chairman of Weston Group, primarily residential housing developers, some commercial, and we've got some MMC factories that have recently opened.
Robert Mulryan from Ballymore Group. We're a large-scale mixed-use developer focused on residential and commercial real estate.
Thank you, guys. So, soaking up what Rob told us about there. So inflation sadly up, interest rates perhaps not edging up on the back of that, likely to come down towards the end of the year. So, of course, us in the property business always love hearing that, particularly those selling houses. Rob is very realistic about the fact that, there's actually, I don't know about, I'm aware that lots of the audience are very involved in developments. And when Rob said the news is full of developments, I was thinking, well, there's an irony, because, of course, what we're not seeing in our world is lots of developments. Anyway, perhaps if I could kick off looking particularly at those that actually build houses, so Robert and Bob, how you see things, particularly around the government's targets, much stated now, perhaps much derided about trying to build 1.5 million homes within the life of this Parliament. In the backdrop we've just heard, what is realistic and what needs to happen to move the housing dial in this country? Kick off perhaps with Bob.
Are we going to get 1.5 million homes in the life of the Parliament? Not a hope. We've already missed the boat. All of the national framework planning that they're putting through is all very welcome and is all heading in that right direction. The problem with that is that's going to feed the next Parliament, not this Parliament. and there's no energy to actually, how do we accelerate what we've already got? So there's millions of planning permissions sitting there, they're not being built. Output on housing in the UK has fallen by at least 40%. It depends where you want to measure it. But there's nobody in the industry who's going to tell you that it's gone up. It's gone down. And it continues to go down. Just in the last couple of months, January is always, for residential selling, the best month of the year. It always has been. And instead of being flat on November, it's actually down. So the downward trend continues. What's driving that? There are no first-time buyers in the market. You just heard consumer confidence is an all-time low. Only needs a slightest thing to knock them off the perch. Mortgages. There is no mortgage guarantee scheme or an equity loan. I'm not trying to use the words help to buy, but how do first-time buyers get into the market? We're told there is a mortgage guarantee scheme coming, but when and what, we don't know. My suspicion is it will be too little, too late. We've got to stimulate the bottom end of the market, and then the rest will flow.
Right. Well, thank you for that very realistic view. Always great to respect the sophistication of the audience, and I think we're all swimming in the same pool here. One for Robert, particularly focused on London, because I know Bob develops in and around London, but Ballymore, do stuff mostly in London. Have you got a view on what all this means specifically for the London market?
Yeah, I think the issues that have come up in the last year, 2 or 3 years, with cost inflation, and I'm not going to go through the list of problems which everyone is aware of, they've had a massively more dramatic impact on high-density development. High-density development, you need far more costs, far more complex. So actually, I would say the downfall that Bob is talking about is actually far worse in London. So you take a 10-year average of construction starts, we're probably down 70%. Like, social housing is so low at the moment, the stats, you kind of get into the law of small numbers. Like, there's 20 boroughs in London that last year started less than 10 affordable homes. Like, you start to get into percentages stop working. So from our perspective, it's about, when we look out at the world and people talk about the living sector, I think it's, if you look out over the last couple of years, what's actually quite interesting is, yes, the living sector has expanded, but actually all of that expansion has come from investment in single-family housing. Single-family housing has gone from being 2% of the market to 50%, which to me shows you that people are saying, we don't want high density, we don't want complex, we don't want BSR, we don't want service charge, we don't want any of this stuff, leasehold reform. And actually multifamily investment, which is high density, it has actually dropped across the UK, and in London it's almost down 50%. So this is the great growth sector in residential, but actually all of the growth is moving down the complexity curve, because investors are saying, well, actually, if I can buy 100 houses off Persimmon, they're delivered in 6 months, I get my rental income straight away. You're offering me a really complicated apartment block in London. It's going to take 2 or 3 years to build. You've got planning, you've got Gateway 2, you've got everything. It's just, unfortunately, London is falling into the too difficult box. And I think we need to kind of get it out of the too difficult box to start to drive investment.
Well, I'd like to come back to that, because we were chatting earlier, weren't we, about this London and perhaps London having a reboot. If I can look at Geeta now, you've got an almost unique experience, Geeta. Phenomenal role as a CEO of a big, largely London-focused housing association, one that was very pioneering in launching its own BTR platform. Now you're sitting on the board of one of the big, juggernaut PLC house builders. Your take on things, please.
Well, I think I would definitely agree that London is a very difficult place, not for across the board for affordable housing and market housing, and it all relates back to what can people afford, and the demand is massive in that lower income group. I mean, medium income group. It's not even lower income; it's medium income. And the ability to meet that demand is incredibly difficult, and particularly in London. And I think what happens is there is increasing cost upon cost upon cost, which is laid upon, whether it's a housing association or a developer, there's an increasing level of regulation, increasing costs that are sort of laid upon it, but no change in the in the sort of model, really, about how you produce affordable housing. So you've got more and more costs being attributed and less ability for those housing associations to be able to borrow, as they did, to be able to develop new homes. And that is causing a complete crisis in affordable housing. And what we are seeing is still shared ownership is still very popular. There is still high demand for it, and it is because it is affordable and people can climb the ladder by getting onto shared ownership as their way onto the market. But I think also there is a lot of discussion about big sites, planning, urban extension, new towns, etc. But we also need to have more discussion around those small and medium enterprises, around smaller sites, around how we can do something now whilst we're awaiting that sort of bigger development.
Love that do something now point, because I was going to slightly challenge you on the discussion piece earlier in your sentence, because I think we'd all agree there's been just so much discussion. This is the 10th version of this event. I'm sure the debate at the first event would have been along these lines. So what I'm keen to flush out and give everyone, including the audience, a bit of time to think about what the something or other we're going to do about it now, because we're living in a world where things are happening incredibly quickly on a geopolitical level, and it's really bringing into sharp focus how little we get done over here. We can be accused, I think very rightly, of doing a lot of navel gazing, including around housing delivery. Let's just chat now and move on to Daniel. Now, Daniel, you a lot of chat there about sort of effectively mainstream housing. You're mostly in a very, very, top end of the market. Your take on how London is perceived by most of your, well, not just buyers, sellers, perhaps they're getting out.
Yeah. Confidence in London is extremely low. I don't want this to be a negative talk, because I've sat and watched panel discussions and I felt deflated because people were saying there's lack of opportunity. And so I don't want to be the person that has the opportunity to speak to you guys and say, yes, there's a lack of opportunity and the market's super tough and no one really wants to live here. I do think there's a lot of opportunity. Look, it is funny, but if you're running a business, it's not funny. We're all running businesses, or we're part of businesses. The ultra high net worth community is hypermobile. Okay, they have multiple passports and they can choose to live anywhere in the world. We need to entice them to live here, and we're not doing that. We're absolutely not doing that. This is a concern because I know people in our industry that will do 3 deals this year, maybe even 2 in the rental market at the top end. And it's a concern, it's grinding to a bit of a halt. And we need to reinvigorate the marketplace. So the ultra high net worths, the good news is that the ultra high net worths that are choosing to move to the Middle East or other parts of Europe, or now with this golden visa, Trump Gold or whatever it may be, might be moving to the US. The good news is that they're desperate to come back to the UK. They're absolutely desperate to come and live in London. It's their home, irrelevant of where they were born. And they want every opportunity to come back and enjoy their time here, school their kids here, build their businesses here, do everything they possibly can, and enjoy probably the best city in the world. But that is being challenged. And the ultra high net worth community are struggling with the instability that we've created for ourselves. And we need to do better.
Okay, I'm going to challenge again. I'm keen, I think we all are, to see some solutions to these problems. So what do we do? Should we be make London great again and wandering around with red hats saying that? So the question is how we do that. Because we were chatting earlier as a group, weren't we, about how London, sad reality, has dropped out of that #1 global city that certainly for much of my career, we all enjoyed. Everyone wants to be here. We didn't need to sell London. Now we do. How do we do that? And I suppose, whose help do we need to do that? Do you want to kick off with that one, Daniel?
Yeah. We're seeing an explosion of wealth creation through entrepreneurs, okay? And that's because businesses are being built online. So there's a huge amount of wealth creation, and we want to entice those people. So if you look at all these golden visas when you go abroad, come and set up your business here free of charge. We'll even pay you to come here and generate wealth in these spaces. We need less bureaucracy around entrepreneurship. We need to make sure that people are able to build their businesses. We need to, not incentivize, we need to challenge the norm of the education process to get our young folk really into the AI world and understand what it can do. I had a 19-year-old come into my office yesterday, and I said to him, "Are you using AI?" Okay, he's the future of our country. Fundamentally, the future of our country is our youth. And he's being told at university not to use AI. How to kneecap our future by telling them not to use AI. So we want guardrails off when setting up businesses. We want to inspire our youth, and we want to keep them here. We want to enable them, through the education of AI, because it's going to impact everyone's role here. Everyone's role. If you're not using it, you're in trouble. I think you've got to start from the youth, and then if you can get the ultra high net worths here building businesses and incubating their talent, I think that would be a great way to start.
Okay, so you touched there on an interesting point, government, U-turn, picking up on encouraging the wealth into the country.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just not a U-turn on non-dom type stuff. It's several donuts for Rachel Reeves to have to do in her car. But I think we get that. So, and Trump, you mentioned his golden visa, which we're seeing all over the world now. So would you, if you were in front of Rachel Reeves saying, right, we need a similar thing here?
Yes.
Good, okay. Right, ideas then for rebooting London. Geeta, your thoughts, please.
I think one of the things we need to do is get more affordable housing back in. I mean, with all the will in the world, we can have a great city, but we need people to stay in it and not move once they hit a certain age and move out. So we need a better range of affordable solutions for younger people. We need to recapitalise housing associations so that they can play their part.
So that's government money?
That is, but it's also existing money that you can use differently. It's not always about new money, but if you can give grant to housing associations for their existing building safety problems, etc., a London issue predominantly, or a city issue, so that they can, they can deal with their sort of legacy properties. That will then release the ability for them to be able to go back into, Section 106 affordable housing, etc. That is desperately required. That can be a shift of grant. It can be a shift of money that goes back into it. So I think there's that. I also think we need to. There are lots of really good partnerships happening. There are big, you've got Old Oak Common, you've got the sort of London transport places. Sort of partnerships that are happening. I think some of those partnerships are really important. Regeneration, it is a way to deal with existing homes and to build new homes. And there needs to be a rethink of really how you can bring investment into regeneration and do that. And I think backing some, as I said, some smaller house builders, there is, you can do that through guarantees. There are existing pots of money Homes England have. How can you better direct it to some of those who need help whilst there is this transition? We know there's huge transition going on at the moment, but very little help for some organisations whilst we go through that transition. So I think redirection and simplification of the rules, and looking again at some of the cost pressures that there are around the new regulations and the cost pressures, so that we can think again about what we're building, making sure we still have quality, but not having so much cost in it that it makes it unaffordable.
I think we'd all recognise out there, for government to stimulate housing, and Bob alluded to the fact, no one's talking about bringing Help to Buy back. And we also know that, as Rob has highlighted, there's only so much money. It sounds like we're going to be borrowing more. It's unbelievable, I think, for many of us think, well, how can we just keep borrowing at this rate? And you touched on something there about how well the money that the government borrows, how well that is deployed, and whether it's deployed in the right places in the right way. I think a lot of us would feel frustrated it's not. Bob, love your view as an all in, you've made the point, you've gone vertically integrated, you've done everything that the industry talked about, embraced modern methods of construction, well done you, you're out there still building houses. What would you like, if you got in front of Rachel Reeves and that gang, what would you be saying that they should be doing to help you?
The number one for the private side of the market is a genuine 95% mortgage. Simple as that. We have many, many customers come into our sales and they just can't get above the lines. Whether it's the deposit ratio, most of the lenders are still stress testing 8% base rates. I understand why that happened 2-3 years ago when interest rates were rising. Nobody knew where the top was. So it was right to stress test that. But for 2 years now, we know we've peaked out. Why are we still stress testing mortgages at 8%?
Well, I heard from Richard Donnell yesterday, for those who don't know, Zoopla, that is likely to come down to more like 6.5%. I don't know if that worries Rob at all, but
we've been hearing that coming. We have been hearing that coming. The other fundamental side of it is, 40% of our output is still affordable housing. And for the first time in 40 years I've been running the business, we have stock of affordable housing. None of the RSLs are capitalised to take that stock. So there's a fundamental block there that, we can't actually, we built it. It's sitting there empty. Every council will tell you they are spending huge amounts on temporary accommodation. Yet we got stock sitting there empty because there is no funding to allow that to move forward.
Okay, we might loop back on how private money could help stimulate this a bit. But can I ask you, and sorry, Bob, look at you, it's okay, slightly more senior, and I'm being a bit presumptuous in saying it. Is part of the problem that we're just not working hard enough? We've all living off the fat of the land the last few decades in our industry?
No, I don't think so. I'm sure that, I still go to work every single day and so does my entire team. I would disagree with that.
You do, but lots of businesses out there aren't.
Over-regulated. That's the other big factor. And it's not just our industry. The country, it's the pendulum. We got to the world financial crisis 2008 and the regulation pendulum's over there. It's now way over here. We need it back in the middle. I'm not saying we scrap all regulation and a free-for-all, but it's over-regulated. Rob touched on it. In London, who wants to build a tower block with building safety regulator that's added at least 2 years time to build a tall building? A year up front on Gateway 2 and a year that we're presuming is going to happen on Gateway 3. You take the interest cost on that and it is ginormous.
So again, thinking about what a government could do, controversial, but wow, controversial decisions are already being made by our government. Foreign aid, slashed. Things are happening. So, and do you feel, and perhaps looking at Robert here as well, that you as developers who are at the sharp end of it are getting in front of the right people in government circles?
Yeah, I think it's always the problem with government, I find, is they want to see the proof in the data, and that takes 2 or 3 years to come true. The data's there now, housing starts have collapsed. Now, we told them 2 or 3 years ago it was going to happen, but they say, well, let's just wait for the problem to be backward looking and then we'll try and solve it, which is always a good starting point. But I think, to me, kind of what would we do, and apologies if people have heard this, because a few people I know in the crowd who've had the unfortunate reality of having to sit with me after a few beers with the same prospect, but I always say the reality in London is, to use a car analogy, is we just build BMWs. It's all we build. Regulations and design standards mean that all we build is BMWs. But not everyone can afford a BMW. I think what I would say is we have to, in London, come up with a reality that we can build a Vauxhall Corsa apartment. And at the moment, you cannot build a Vauxhall Corsa apartment. 80% of the demand for housing in London is below 700 quid a foot. So if we could build something at 400 or 500 quid a foot, we would build as many of them as you want, because we know there is thousands upon thousands of people. The problem is we can't build at that price point. like what I would do, which wouldn't cost the government any money, is take the design standards, and this has nothing to do with building safety before anyone lynches me. This is literally like someone walking in going, oh, you know, I can look out this window. Wouldn't it be great if I could also look out over here? Dual aspect, that'd be better, wouldn't it? Yeah, that costs a lot more, but let's just put it in. They walk up and say, that balcony, it's a bit small. Should we not force the developers to build a bigger balcony? That'll be better. And it's kind of this, but this just grows and grows and grows. And now we're in a situation that we can't even afford to build the apartments that people can afford to buy. And this is why all this discussion about affordable housing, I kind of laugh when I hear it, because the reason that the problem will never be solved unless, and what I would do is hire 2 or 3 of the most stubborn, the QSs, who might be here today, and just say, get them in a room, get the London design standards and say, you're not allowed to leave until the average apartment cost is down 25%. You're not allowed to touch building safety. You're not allowed to touch anything to do with that. That's regulation, that's law. That's one side. This is just aesthetics. This is making things look nicer. And I would say you're not allowed to leave until costs come down 25%. And once you did that, then actually we could build and sell at prices that people can afford to buy it. Why? If you give people a choice, say, do you want a storage heater on the wall that you'll use probably less than 10 times a year, cost maybe 5, 10 grand, or do you want a fully integrated M&E system, which we have to do in London, which has huge maintenance costs, huge upfront costs, and all you get is a steel radiator on the wall, that costs you about 40 grand. So you need to borrow 36,000 of that, you need to pay interest on it. Oh, just take the electric heater, thanks. And I think the reality is we don't give people that choice. We force them to buy the BMW. The reality is they can't afford to buy it. Then we put in policies to make them borrow more money to buy the BMW. And I said, well, if they just want a Vauxhall Corsa, and that's the first time buyer, it's your first car, and they can have a BMW later, let us build the Vauxhall Corsa that they can actually afford to buy. That to me solves, it doesn't actually cost any money either. You know, this isn't more tax, this is just building stuff people can afford to buy. And I don't know why, in some ways, we say this to government, and they say, well, we're proud our buildings are of a higher standard than the rest of the UK. I'm like, yeah, but people can't afford them. And they're like, why can't you build like you build in Manchester? And I say, well, no, we want our buildings to be nicer. But the building's not there. It's a CGI. We can't afford to build it. And I just think...
Are you being heard, Robert? And are you getting in front of the right people?
I'd say the chances of a couple of QSs being put in charge of the London design standards is about 0 to 2%. But the reality is, if you just took the London design, just scribbled out London, and then just took the Manchester ones and just kind of put that in there, I'd say it solved 90% of the viability challenges in London today. That's just taking regulations from another city in London.
Well, I'm intrigued.
Sorry, another city in the UK.
Because what you haven't mentioned, which many in your space do mention, of course, is SIL and the affordable housing tariff, and how that often makes things below the water.
Listen, I could sit here for an hour giving you all the list of problems, but I think to focus on problems that don't cost the exchequer money. I think they're the ones, if Rachel Reeves was sitting there, Rob's here going, well, we don't have lots of money at the moment. Well, that's what they tell us, even though they have loads of money for other stuff. I would say 2 things I would do that don't cost any money is the design standards. That actually doesn't cost anything. You're just building, okay, they won't be as nice buildings, but people can afford them. It's a Vauxhall Corsa. It's not as nice as a BMW, but you can afford to buy it. That's the priority. When you're designing a Vauxhall Corsa, the guy isn't given the BMW design standards. You know, he's given the Vauxhall Corsa design standards. The other thing I would say is on shared ownership. The cap in shared ownership of 90,000 has been in place now for probably over 10 years. It hasn't been linked to RPI. I can tell you, a couple living in London, both of them earning 50,000 a year, are not rich, right? So why is it, because it's only political, why is it that the 90,000 cap hasn't moved? The only reason it hasn't moved is because some politician doesn't want it to go above 100,000, psychologically. But yet, to me, it's just, how can it be correct at 90,000 over 10 years ago? And I don't know what inflation is over the last 10 years. Well, it must be 30-odd%. But the cap just stays the same. So every year, less and less people are in the affordable housing net. It's bananas. Just put it up. It also doesn't cost the exchequer any money. Put it up to 120,000.
Okay. So, I mean, we're hearing lots of issues.
Sorry.
Not unexpected. No, don't apologise, because it's the reality. And boy, do we need to drink lots of reality now to come up with solutions. So maybe, Geeta, given all that experience you've had, both sides of the fence, as it were, affordable, registered provider, and now very much at the hard-nosed developer end of things, your take, please.
Well, I think actually quite a lot has been discussed in that number of solutions. One is recapitalise housing associations, right? Get them back in the game.
Can I just
there are
challenge you? How much money, for Rob's benefit, are we talking about?
Well, we are talking billions, but if you think of the bill for building safety, if you just took what housing associations are spending on building safety and they weren't spending it on building safety, they would be able to do what they used to do in terms of development. So it's just accessing it for social rented homes. I mean, that's a very simple thing. It's also, we used to, as housing associations, if rents were way below social rent, you used to be able to increase them a little bit more every year so that eventually they'd catch up. Can't do that anymore. That was got rid of ages ago. So that would be an increase in rent, but only for those who are actually on very, very low rents, below social housing rents. There are things that can be done. They've all been put to government around what can be done to actually help push development again for housing associations. For-profit providers are in the sector now. They're doing a great job, I think, working particularly with Section 106. They want the simplicity of that. They're building partnerships and relationships with developers. That's a good thing. But of course, there's a myriad of for-profit providers because people are trying to find a solution to a problem, which is how do you get the Section 106? So there's almost too many now that are forming, and you need the long-term players to really be there and doing it for the right reasons. So I think there's stuff around there. I completely agree, and as I was mentioning, we need to look at those standards and costs. There's a decision made every week about an additional cost. And actually, you could come in and do the same really about accessing different pots of money. How could you put people in a room and say, this money, this cost, how do we make it simple so that we're not having to apply for 10 different grants to be able to do things? How do we make it simple so we could rip up those rules and be able to apply these different pots of money, which local authorities have, housing providers have, and put it together? And would you like a Vauxhall Corsa? I was very interested in the Vauxhall Corsa.
I'd like to be able to build one, yeah.
That's been a long time, that one. But it's really around how can we simplify. Let's just simplify everything, simplify it so that we can get things going. And if you look across to the build-to-rent sector, single-family housing sector or whatever, how can you have discounted market rent, more of that so that so more people can access that sort of rented pool as well. So it's really, what are the stimulus side of things as well that will come? They'll come later down the line, but what can we apply now?
Thank you, Geeta. I know Rob wants to reply. For those that do want to ask questions, do put your hands up, and the team with the mics will find you. Thank you. So, Rob, your feedback, please. Thank you, Rob. That was great. We've got a question from the floor. If you could say who you are and where you're from. Thank you.
Sure. Michael Toogood from Encore Estate Management. Government this week announced that it was going to ban the sale of new leasehold homes and introduce common hold, although I think we've forgotten that we've had it for 20 years, but just nobody's used it. Is that going to be a fantastic solution that we've just been talking to the problems we've been talking about? Is it B, going to be the final nail in the coffin of hitting those targets, which, as Bob says, we're not going to hit anyway, or is it just a complete red herring?
So I think, if I got it right, it only applies to new homes, isn't it, as things stand? So
I'm not. They haven't said.
I think the implications it has. So, Bob, do you want to respond on that?
Yeah, the point about the common hold is actually shutting the stable door after the horse is long gone. And I'll go back to when zero ground rents were introduced. That actually effectively created the common hold. We as a business now, the ground rents have zero value. So when we complete a development, we gift the freehold to the management company, which is the owners of the apartment. So they have a virtual freehold. So from our perspective, there's no need to change anything because the problem's already been fixed by zero ground renting.
And Robert, are you in the same?
Yeah, I think on some of our schemes, it's a little bit more complex because when you have, I don't know if anyone's in the crowd ever lived in a common hold, but I think the grass is not always greener, is what I would say, because at least when decisions are being made and you've got an estate, and some of our estates are 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 homes, to have a common hold and trying to get 4,000 people to agree to something is almost impossible. So I do think this is a classic kind of gut reaction to something which hasn't been fully thought through. And let's be honest, there's been a lot of them in the last 10 years. But I do think the government should just pause and think for a moment, because we have a lot of, we have an estate management business with 12,000 units under management, and we are in discussions with our leaseholders about moving the freehold over to them and giving them more controls. I think the feedback we're getting is once they understand the obligations they're taking on, actually the whole common hold debate just flatlines. So actually, we're kind of happy that you're all doing that work for us. Because the reality is, with common hold comes responsibility. Not to use the old Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great, but like it's you are then responsible. So you have to set up a manco, and then one of the residents needs to become a director of this manco. Like, I don't know who's going to sign up to become a director of a 4,000 unit estate manco and take on personal responsibility as a directorship. So once the realities come home, I think all of a sudden the interest drops. Is what we've seen.
More questions, please. We've got one. There we go. This gentleman over here, is it? Who's first? Sorry, over there. Beetle.
Working. Hi. This is a question for the whole panel. I mean,
if you can say who you are and where you're from.
Alexander Lewis from Tribeca Holdings. The politicians aren't capable of taking the difficult decisions that need to be made to actually solve the housing crisis. That's the reality, because they have a conflict of interest. They want to get re-elected, and they don't want to be unpopular. And there are some very difficult decisions and unpopular decisions that need to be made. Rob, to your point about 2 QSs in the room, it's exactly that kind of thinking we need. Does the panel think that actually, a bit like with the Bank of England taking control of interest rates away from the government, something that I've long been lobbying for, to anyone who will listen, that there should be a housing policy committee that takes difficult decisions away from the government and actually can deliver housing?
Right. Who'd like to kick off with that? Geeta, have you any thoughts on that? So basically, I think it's, thank you, Beetle, it's that quite well-rehearsed argument about housing regarded as infrastructure, and it's not a political football to be kicked around.
I mean, it would be delightful if housing was considered infrastructure and we had proper long-term gains. I think politically, that is probably one step that would be too far. I think the sort of national, having a national policy, regional policy, working that through is going to be more likely. I think if we can link it, though, to infrastructure, so we have long-term decision-making and long-term funding, that would be brilliant.
Thank you. More questions, please, from the floor or from the networking room? I don't know if, is it Ryan in there with the microphone? We got anyone with their hands up over there? No? Okay. Coming back...
Can I just add something?
Yeah, go for it.
You mentioned that we need to give the government some time to make decisions. One of the first decisions they made was related to tax policy of the ultra high net worth community, which just shut down the top of the market practically. That doesn't help anybody, doesn't help anyone. So I'm very happy to be patient. I grew up in local authority housing till I was 11. I've been an agent since I was 17 and didn't go to university. I've been very patient with my career. But when you're running a business and you're an entrepreneur, and I believe we all are actually entrepreneurs, when you feel pain, you want the government to recognise it. And they're going to have to make hard and fast decisions. They're going to have to react much quicker. There was a piece that I was able to get into the Times where I said, you've made this tax decision, you've seen the reaction, You've been too slow to make the decision that is required to instigate change. And at this point, the ultra-high net worths who, let's just say, if you are in an entrepreneurial space and I have the ability to build wealth and then I decide to leave, it all goes with me. So the ultra-high net worths just leave. They take their kids with them, they take their staff with them, and they go abroad. They're not coming back because we change policy 7 weeks later or 8 weeks later. They're done, they're gone. They've taken a 4-year tenancy or 2-year tenancy, they've set up their business, they've incorporated it, they've put their kids in school, it's gone. And so we have to have faith in our government that they're going to make the decisions, they're going to look at the data, they're going to speak to the people in the room, and they're going to enable us to be more successful because we're in competition. London was this incredible, or I still think it's the best city in the world, and I get the opportunity to travel a lot. It's without doubt the best city in the world. We're not confident about it, we don't shout about it, but we are now in competition with every city in the world and their tax policy, and they're enticing us all the time to go and set up our business somewhere else. And we have to take a much more assertive view on how to retain these people in our country, how to incentivize them continue to build businesses here.
Okay, let's pick up on this because Rob, encouraged us to be patient. There are a lot of politicians out there right now, one very notable one, who's talk about impatient and also demonstrating, like it or not, that he can get shit done like that. It's scary for all of us, I guess, who've grown up in the world we have, to hear someone say, apropos Greenland, don't know if anyone heard the news that he was chatting about in Congress yesterday, he said, and I listened very intently to Radio 4 this morning, we're going to get Greenland one way or another. So to hear that our government should be sort of there, dear, not giving you a hard time with your comment, Rob, because we get where you're coming from, but I think lots of people in this room would say we've got to get stuff done. Difficult stuff. I've made the point about how foreign aid was thrown out of the window. And Rachel Reeves, we all know what a disaster last autumn's budget was. She's got to get out of jail, Carl, because boy, has the world changed since she did that. It's an excuse to reboot and review things. So, thoughts from the panelists by way of wrap up. And let's send the audience away happy. Sorry, Rob, go. Okay, we're going to wrap up here. So I think, Daniel, we know what you'd say to Rachel Reeves. Open the doors, yeah, let that money in and the businesses in.
Yeah, just very quickly, irrelevant of your ethnicity or skin colour, what everyone wants is more opportunity. Culturally, we're a great city, fabulous. Let's applaud, it's amazing. Yeah. 60% of music is produced here in the UK. We have an amazing theatre district. There's a lot of talent here. They need to be enthused. There needs to be more opportunity. That's the kind of stuff that we need to be championing. That's what we need to do. Do I think we need to open the floodgates? I don't think we need to open the floodgates, but I do think that we have to recognise we cannot be the lethargic London that rests on our principles of us being the greatest city in the world and no one else can touch us. I think we have to be much more assertive with our views and enticing people to our city and to our country.
Right. Would the rest of the panel want to add anything to that, or do we echo that sentiment?
I think it's a competitive world out there, and I think you can wish for the world as you want it to be or react to the reality. And like Donald Trump is a reality. You could wish he's not there, but he is there. And actually, he's been voted in twice now. So whatever political nature he has, it has support. So you have to accept and react to the reality of the world, and it is competitive. And I think London has rested on its laurels a little bit. I think it could afford, and I love this city, but it could afford to do so. We're the greatest city in the world. The Olympics was here, 2014, 15. Like, you couldn't touch London, but we have rested on our laurels a little bit, and we've allowed people to catch up. I still think we're in the top cities in the world, but to me, we need to be aware, there's a big world out there and they want to eat London's lunch. They love what London have. Like, Paris would give anything to move the city of London to Paris. They couldn't do it because of Brexit, but let's not let them itch away at us. Let's not, like, as I said, 10 years ago, Mr. Boyce over there who works for us was over in Dubai selling apartments in London, so taking Middle Eastern money to fund house building in London. I walked by a fancy hotel in London a couple of weeks ago and they were selling houses in Dubai. So taking UK money to fund houses in Dubai. And it's kind of go, how the world has changed. You know, we do need to be a bit more confident. And I think there's a classic with the GDP, and I think Rob said, you know, 0.7% growth. It's not that bad, but it's not a recession. It's kind of, since when is a recession the base? Like, why is it? Why is that? We're not in recession, so it's okay. No, we should be 2.5% GDP growth. That's okay.
Well, look, conscious that we all need to go out there and do our stuff to get up to that 2.5%. I just want to point something out, Robert. Anyone point out? If you can see here, men at work, that sign there. So the question to Rob is, did he edit that? Because guess what? There were a couple of blokes sitting down having a fag and a cup of tea. I hope not. Anyway, brilliant session. Before we wrap up, I'd like to thank the Deverell Smith crew for laying on this fantastic event. Well done. And there's someone very special I'd particularly like to mention, because by happy coincidence, Andrew Deverell Smith's PA is my old PA, Sally Smith, who is the most fantastic girl in the world, and she's just got engaged. Well done, Sal. Chris is a very, very lucky man, I promise you. Anyway, if you could all show your appreciation for our fantastic panel. Thank you.